This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers Podcast.
The Hidden Killers Podcast.
With Tony Bruschi.
Lots being made about Ann Taylor being the defense attorney for Bryan Kohberger. We've been talking about it here. We've had guests on it here and the possible conflict of interest and the money thing coming out of, well, is this more for money? Is this more for this or that? You know, different perspectives are a good thing. And I love being able to facilitate that here on this podcast. So it's not all just, here's one way that we think. I'm always open to having my mind change or just be educated on stuff. And that is precisely what our next guest may actually do. Bob Motta is joining us. He's a defense attorney. He's also host of his own podcast, which, as I say, is insanely fascinating. It's called Defense Diaries. Do check that out. But we're going to be talking about that from a defense attorney perspective and from a legal perspective. The accusations, the public optics of the Kohberger case, and Ann Taylor being the defense attorney for Bryan Kohberger. I want to jump into that. Bob, where does all this stand from a true legal perspective?
First of all, the money goes to the county.
Okay.
The county public defender's office. It doesn't go to her. So, and it's $200 an hour. Now, and I saw that exact tweet yesterday by Jennifer Koffendaner.
Koffendaner. Yep.
Who's been like raging on the conflict of interest thing. And I keep trying to tell her it's not a conflict, dude. I know it's got bad optics. I know it's not a good look for her, but a conflict of interest means that she has information from Kara that would completely inhibit her from being able to defend Kohberger. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what a conflict is. Not that there's a connection between the two. That's not what a conflict of interest is. She just doesn't understand it. And I've had like me and multiple other attorneys trying to explain it to her. I'm like, look, I know the optics are bad. And I know it's like a bad look, but she's the best person for the job. And it's a small state in terms of the number of certified death penalty attorneys that can handle it. You know, like you have to trust, because like, I know I kind of jumped to a different thing. So, but going back to the thing now, the money goes to the public defender's office and she'll get paid out of that. Now, $200 an hour, like, you know, I mean, I guess to lay people that aren't attorneys or doctors or things, it's not a ton of money.
No, I get that, but it's a public defender role. I mean, it's not.
Well, she's the chief public defender.
Okay.
She's not a public defender. She's the chief public defender. Like, she left private practice and came back. And remember, the money's not coming to her. And when Koffendaner or Daffer like spread that money out, she just did simple math and said, okay, $200 times 40 hours a week times a year. And like, that's where she came up with it. That's not how it works.
Okay.
So, like the hours get computed. She obviously still has her other caseload. She's not working on this case 40 hours a week. Like this case is going to take a year or two to get to trial. That's just facts.
Sure.
You know, like we're not having a preliminary hearing until June. That should tell you everything you need to know. Like, I've never heard of a preliminary hearing going that long. And that's if they don't go to a grand jury, which
I'm surprised they haven't yet. Yeah,
I know. And I guess it's infrequent in Idaho, but like it's not their preferred course to get an indictment or an information. But like, I'm shocked. Like with this case in particular, like in my state in Illinois, you know, they almost always go to a grand jury because it's preferable for the prosecution. You don't have the defendant there.
Sure.
You don't have the defense counsel there. You're putting your own witness. It's in secret. And, you know, it's basically, it's unchecked in terms of there's nobody on the other side to challenge anything. So I'm shocked in this case that they, like, I'll still be shocked if it actually goes to a preliminary hearing. So what I'm saying is she's still got her caseload. She's not going to be making $384,000 from the case, you know? So what, like, my dad was John Wayne Gacy's lawyer back in 1978.
Sure.
And they were paid by the city because Gacy was indigent at that point. They were both private counsel, but they you know, applied to the court to get fees because they had to get paid. They understood the nature of the case. The judges understood the nature of the case. A case like that does take over your practice.
Sure.
You know, so like in 1978, you know, and that money they probably made equivalent to $180,000 on the case, which is like bargain basement.
Sure.
Like if you look at any case, and my dad had been a public defender for 15 years before he was in private practice, before he got the Gacy case. So no, man, it's not unusual at all. And it's frankly, for the quality of counsel that he's getting, it's a pretty good price. I think what's rubbing people the wrong way is the fact that there's this voice out there saying that she should be conflicted out, but she shouldn't. Well, I've done a really good informative TikTok, and y'all should follow it at Defense Diaries podcast.
Okay.
I've got a lot of followers on there. I've done one specifically breaking down why it's not a conflict of interest. I don't want to bore you all with it.
Sure. No, I understand it both ways. I understand on paper, and this way it's not, but there's so many horrible optics on this case. And ultimately in the courtroom. Yeah.
You know what I mean? The Constitution is not about optics.
I know. You're exactly right.
It's not about how we feel.
I know. And I completely get that. But when it comes to the chance of an appeal, though, the optics do kind of matter, do they not? At the end of all this?
Yeah, you're like, quit following Jennifer. I'm telling you, you're parroting everything she says, and it's all wrong. No, because look, the reality of that is that when they, and I like her a lot, but she's wrong on this issue.
Okay.
And when it came down, so the way, like the day that he's going to get appointed an attorney, there was a conversation that took place that morning between the judge, the prosecutor, and Ann Taylor. This isn't like it's just something that popped out of thin air. It's not how it works. She said, all right, well, the judge said, look, I'm going to appoint Ann Taylor on this thing. She's the most qualified to handle it. Prosecutor's like, fine. He doesn't really have any say-so in the matter. Ann Taylor is advised. She's like, all right, I'm going to do a conflict check. She says, okay, well, I've represented a couple of the parents. Judge is going to say, okay, well, do you believe it? And remember that the person who is responsible for deciding if there's a conflict, and the only person that can do it is the lawyer, because the lawyer is the only one who knows the information because of attorney-client privilege. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So, and what creates a conflict is if she has knowledge from something that Kara may have told her related to her case, that then makes it impossible for her to zealously represent Bryan Kohberger. Do you understand? Like, so say for instance, like a perfect example is like, because we know Kara got picked up on drug charges.
Yes.
Probably meth or Molly or something. But say, for instance, I give this example. Say when Kara got arrested, she's like, and Ann's like, well, you got to tell me what's going on. She's all right, look, like my daughter's, Xana is over at University of Idaho. They have a party house. Her and I kind of worked out a little deal. I supply her with a little bit. Kids that come and party, she sells, and we split the proceeds. At that point, she then say that Kara says that to her.
Yeah.
She's armed with that information. And then because we know that Kohberger, at least the story that's out there, has a heroin issue. At least he did at some point. There's a likelihood that he's still doing drugs. So say that she then goes to Bryan Kohberger, and she's already off that case. So before she entered her appearance on Kohberger, she had withdrawn from Kara's earlier in the morning. So they were never current clients together. It was a former client, and now he's a current client. Okay, so because there's two rules that apply: 1.7, 1.9. 1.7 is when you have two current clients. Is there a conflict? 1.9 is when you have a former and a current. So say she goes over to Kohberger's, and he's in jail, and she starts talking to him. She's like, well, what's the story here? And he says, look, I was in the area. Like, I'm going to be completely honest with you. I was driving around. Xana's my dealer. Like, that's who I buy from. It was 4 a.m, which is not a crazy time for people to be driving around trying to get a fix. She's not in a college town. He's like, she usually leaves the slider for me open. I went up there, I was just going to pick a little something up. I walk in and everyone's dead. I freak out. I leave. I don't call the police because I'm a PhD in criminology. I'm assuming that they will think that I'm the person that did it because I'm the one calling it in. I'm the last one to be there, and he doesn't know at that point, or maybe he does, if it's true that DM saw him.
Yeah.
Or whoever the perpetrator was, so at that point, Ann Taylor then has information from Kara and that she was supplying that substantiates his story. So you understand what I'm saying? So
sure.
she like I'm giving my daughter Molly, she's selling it, or HDMA or MDMA, and she's selling it. And, and now Kohberger's telling her this story, and she's like, oh man, like that I actually have information from my other client that I now, because of attorney-client privilege, cannot use in order to aid him in his case. She would be conflicted out because she would, you know what I mean? Like, so that's the thing, man. Like, that's where the conflict arises, like that type of information. Now, if Kara comes forward and goes to, the prosecutor and says, look, I told Ann Taylor this, and this.
Yeah.
The prosecutor's like, wow. Yeah. Like, I mean, that would be something that she would want to use, in the defense of her client. Because she can come in and waive privilege, meaning Kara, and like whatever privilege information she gave Ann Taylor, she could then disclose it to the court and ask the prosecutor or the court itself to say, look, I supplied Ann Taylor with this information. He needs to be conflicted out because she's not going to be able to represent. And really the conflict is to Kohberger, not Kara. Her case is done. She's got another lawyer. It doesn't affect her at all. Who it affects is Kohberger. So all the hemming and hawing and stamping their feet, like people don't realize that that's who the conflict affects, not Kara. Yeah, I mean, you feel moderately bad, but public defenders don't talk to their clients, but like 1 or 2 times ever during a case. It's not like they had some close relationship. Yeah, she represented her a few other times in other, sounds like little drug cases, but like public defenders are stretched thin. They have a huge caseload. So, like all those things put together, it really kind of creates a situation where I get that the optics are bad, man, and it may be a bad look. And like I said in my own podcast, when I was discussing this issue, I'm like, look, if I had been represented by an attorney on a separate case, a year ago, or even currently, and I found out that lawyer was now representing the person that is alleged to have murdered my child, I'd be beyond myself. I'd be beyond, like, I'd have all the bad feels. I'd be like, oh my God, like, but like the law is not about feelings. It's not about emotions. I know that seems cold and callous, but that's the facts.
Yeah.
It's about the law can be cruel and unfeeling in terms of its administration. And the fact is, she did her conflict checks and she's saying to the court, I don't have any conflicts. Now, Bryan Kohberger would be the one ultimately, if he found out or had an inkling that she had information that she knew from Kara that she just was not divulging to him, and that was going to hurt him, he could absolutely go in and say, I want a new lawyer.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think she's withholding information that is helpful to me based on this relationship she had with Kara, as her client. So, I mean, it could still play out that way. And like I said, man, I get how it looks on its face. It's just, it's like, it's just not a huge state. There's not like a huge pool of lawyers to choose from. You know what I mean? And,
sure.
And frankly, based on her qualifications, from what I've read about her, she's the most qualified. Because look, man, for the administration of justice, we need competent lawyers on both the defense and the prosecution. No one wants to retry this case, and that issue is never going to be an issue that's going to get it overturned on appeal, like the conflict of interest, because the appellate court isn't going to look at it. Like if it's not raised as an issue by anyone and it's not being raised by the judge and it's not being raised by the prosecutor, that is how you preserve issues for appeal. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? Like if the prosecutor had filed a motion saying, I want her removed because I believe that there's a conflict, and they had a hearing on it, then the issue's been preserved. If this just goes to trial and it's never brought up as a potential issue, waived for the purposes of appeal. That's just how appeals work. So, you don't get to bring up things out of thin air. You have to have them on the record. That's why when people are getting annoyed by lawyers when they're objecting during trials, why does this guy keep objecting? An objection is what locks in an possible issue for appeal later down the road. Because if you fail to object, the issue is waived. So that's what the real purpose of objections are. So that's kind of where that lays, man. That's a red herring in terms of being concerned that's ultimately going to be a problem down the road when the appeals hit. It's a more likely scenario is if they removed her really without any kind of rational reasoning behind it other than people's feelings and emotions, and he gets a bum lawyer, that's a bigger issue than the other way around.
This is an examination of the hidden human condition.
This is the Hidden Killers
The
Podcast
Hidden Killers Podcast.
with Tony Bruschi.
Don't you love learning new things? Bob Motta, thank you for joining us. He also has his own podcast. It's called Defense Diaries. Do check that out. He's, of course, a defense attorney and very good one at that. So appreciate him joining us. Love to hear your thoughts on all that. You can call in and give them to us, 888-5-KILLER, 888-554-5537. You can call 24/7 and air your opinion. We may even use it on a future episode of the program. My name is Tony Bruschi. You can follow us wherever you download podcasts. You can get a commercial-free experience of the show through Apple Podcasts, and you become a premium subscriber. We would definitely appreciate that. You can follow me on Twitter at TonyBPod. I'm Tony Bruschi. Thanks for listening.